It's Sunday morning 9:30 and the mess closes at 10, so I have to go and get breakfast right now. After that we'll start working on the idea. So before starting, here's the idea. So there's an app named Strava. So people use it for basically two things. First one is tracking, to track their workouts. Second is the community aspect, in which they share their runs and their PRs and stuff like that. So my idea was to create a similar platform but for coding. In simple words, I'm creating Strava for coding. And to start with, I want to implement the tracking part, and afterwards we'll go into community aspect and other stuff. And since me and most of the people I've met in college use VS Code for coding, the very first starting point would be to create a VS Code extension that tracks your particular coding session, and at the end of the session it can give you a summary of how much you have coded in that. So let's start with seeing how to build an extension. So after a bit of research, I found that VS Code has its own API called VS Code API, and using this API we can make extensions for the VS Code editor. And they also have a blog, Your First Extension, which gives you a step-by-step tutorial on how to get started and set everything up. Basically, I had to run these 2 and 3 commands, and after that this whole project was set up for me by VS Code only with this initial code. And now if I run this extension, then it will open a sample VS Code window with the extension currently installed in it. So if I go Control Shift P, so basically each extension works on different commands, and by default it provides a hello world command. So if I just click on this hello world command, you can see it says hello world from Strava, which means the extension is working. And this is where we have created the hello world command. So that was easy. Next part would be to figuring out how to give it a separate window, and then we'll move on how to add UI to the extension and how to actually track the progress while somebody's code. Alright, so a bit of a pit stop. We have a LinkedIn internship hiring test. So I'll get back after 90 minutes. So the test is over. I was able to solve one question completely, one question 10 out of 15 test cases, and one question 7 out of 15 test cases. There were 3 questions only. And so the OT is done, the lunch is done, the room is not done. Let's get back to the extension. Quick update, create a command named count that will count the number of words and the letters of the currently open document of the current window. So before adding more features, I wanted to see how the UI part would work. Now in VS Code, you have few different options to implement the UI. You have a primary sidebar, which is controlled by these activity buttons or activity icons, whatever they are said. So I can display something here, or you have a secondary sidebar, so UI components can be displayed here too. With this, you have the bottom panel in which you can add different windows here to display your content, and also you have other options like displaying text on the status bar and stuff. So finally, for the UI, I took inspiration from 2 places. The first one is an extension itself, which is called CodeSnap, and what this does is creates a screenshot of your code and you can post it on other social media websites. This is how CodeSnap looks like. It creates a separate window, which is not a secondary sidebar. As you can see, it's not a primary sidebar. I think it's kind of a web view or something. So basically it creates a separate, I would say, editor window that will display this image on VS Code. And on GitHub, Microsoft has some VS Code extension samples, which has a web view API sample, which does exactly the same thing. And I think I'll be using this code to create a separate window for my extension. Alright, so the web view is working. If I use the show command, then it creates a new editor view, progress view, and in this space we can display whatever we want to display. Also comment down, what is your chess.com elo? It's been like an hour and I'm trying to add an image in a web view, but for some reason the image is not loading. It does not generate any error, or the extension is not stopping or abrupting, and all the other elements like buttons, text, input fields, everything is working, just the image part is not being loaded. Alright, so the images that are available in the project locally or that are hosted locally are not being loaded in the extension. I don't know what the problem is. Maybe it's the problem with the path, or it's the problem with the file structure, or maybe the environment is different. Whatever that is. So I scrapped that idea, and now what I'm doing is I'm uploading the image that I want to display in my Google Drive, and then I'm creating a shareable link which is public. And then if I write the drive link of that particular image in a certain format, then you can see the image is being displayed on the web view of the extension. Okay, so after fixing the image error, now the canvas is not working. Alright, so I was not able to complete the image generation part because there were a lot of complications that were attached to that problem. The first thing was, so to display anything in the web view part of the VS Code extension, what you have to do is in the backend you have to create an HTML markup and then that file would be rendered into your web view. The thing was, the behavior of the HTML document in a normal browser and its behavior in a web view in VS Code extension was quite difficult. Things like rendering a simple image in the web view got a bit complicated. I have to like put that image into a web server and then I have to fetch that image from the server and then using that link I have to render it on the web view. And so I decided to skip it for now and focus my attention into the main workings of the extension. So the main working of the extension for now would be to track a coding session, and at the end of the session it would give you the whole summary of whatever work you have done right now. For that I've created two commands in the extension. One is the start session command and the other one is the stop session command, which marks the start and stop of these sessions. Coming to the tracking part, I found the solution of the tracking part on a Stack Overflow answer, and the solution is something like this. So whenever a session start or the start session command is called, the JavaScript on the extension will spawn a new child process that will use a Python file that is included in the extensions folder. And this Python file would be responsible for tracking the whole coding session and logging everything into a log.csv. And later when the session ends, I'm using CSV parser to parse that log.csv into a JavaScript file, and then through that try to generate a summary of the session. Now a good thing about this process is, since I'm spawning a new child process and it is not attached to the process in which the extension is running on, so once you've started a session, you can track your process not only in a single VS Code file but across different files, different VS Code tabs, and even different VS Code windows. So you just have to start the session once, and until you have not ended the session or you have not closed that particular window, you can use how many ever projects you want, how you can switch to different windows and you can switch to different files. The session would be tracked and you will get a session summary out of it. Another good thing about that tracking is it also logs the name of the file in which you are working on. So that could be useful to gather information about how much you have worked in a particular file and how much you have made changes to certain files. So now the next task was to create a session summary from the data we have logged throughout the session. So I've created a basic summary for that just for the sake of this video. I now start the session. You can see the session start message has appeared. And now I can work on whatever I want. And after my coding session has ended, I can use the stop session command. I can say the session ended, message has appeared. Now if I go back to my log.csv, here you can see in the initial logs file name is demo.txt, and later the file name has changed because I have changed my file there. Apart from that, gives you a very basic summary for now. First of all, it gives you the session time. Right now it is giving the session time in milliseconds, but I can easily change it into a much more readable format. Next, it gives you a very primitive summary of what I have thought in a real extension. That is, it gives you the number of characters that you have typed, it gives you the number of numbers you have typed, number of spaces you have typed, number of backspaces, and number of colons for the programmer. I can add up upon it to count the number of words I have typed throughout the session from the stream of logs and the pattern of spaces in it. Similarly, I can count the number of lines in it from the pattern of enters. To add a bit more of complexity, what I was thinking was, in some way, if I can figure out how many functions are created or how many loops are created using the starting and ending of a parenthesis, something like that, I don't exactly know. And also the number of classes and objects made. But for now, the main crux of this extension, the main technical side of this extension, that is the tracking part, is done. From here, I just have to add upon it to make it much more better, make the session summary much more valuable for tracking purposes and much more shareable. And I have to figure out how to generate the final screenshot and image of the session.